Hello everyone, and welcome to the latest installment of the Royce Reader. Today I will be doing a reading of the article entitled, Where Did All the Arena Rock Bands Go? Originally published December 31st, 2012. Cheap Chalupas takes a breather from undermining the ethnic cohesion of his country of birth for a glorious experience of authentic face stuffing to link to a pitchfork story about the pittance that rock stars get paid today. In the comments, Lord of Lies responds with an interesting take on why there are so few bands today that have any staying power beyond one or two radio-ready songs. Quote, The era of the long-lasting arena rock band with scores of top 10 hits is over for four reasons. Number one, the low-hanging fruit of novel guitar riffs has been picked clean. It's just much harder now to compose more than one or two catchy tunes that don't blatantly rip off songs from the past. Auto-tune to the contrary, notwithstanding. How many ways can a 12-note scale be arranged? Depressingly, there may be a limit. Plus, the ready availability and replayability of 40-year-old rock songs means that current artists can't plagiarize the past without getting called on it. This was perhaps not so much the case for past artists, who could safely crib from older songs that weren't subject to as much radio or internet replaying. Number two, the incentive structure has changed. A dude who pens one decent song can get on stage and score chicks for years, maybe even decades, based on that frantic bestowal of fame. Internet play action and advanced marketing offer instant fame to the fly-by-night, one-hit wonder musician. The pussy rewards for male artistry flow faster and stronger today than they did in the past, thanks partly to unshackled female hypergamy and partly to the betatization of the average American male. As a result, the self-perceived need to pump out multiple albums of high-quality work has diminished. Number three, easy living, such as porn, video games, endless plates of food stamps, has taken the edge off the urgency to create a compendium of works of spectacular art that can win over a large and dedicated audience of admirers and payers. Men, in a word, are being medicated into comatose feminized stupor by a dopaminergic distractions. Number four, diversity is our lack of diversity. The advent of the diverse playground known as the internet has created so many ostensible musical niches, appealing to everyone's most personalized tastes, that it has, paradoxically, made music less diverse by funneling would-be artists into similar musical paths, which maximize the odds for their voices being heard above the din. What point is experimentation and building an au revoir of the long haul, over the long haul, when your potential audience is so pre-fragmented and fickle? It may explain why music is getting louder today. I'd add that there exists the possibility that the people of the West are simply getting less creative in some genetically physiological sense. Perhaps it's all those BPAs in our plastics and pills in our water. Unquote. It's a good question why the modern music industry produces so few stadium rock bands anymore. Prosperity likely has something to do with it. And the reasons given above are plausible, if not proven. You can make the case that someone like Justin Bieber or Kesha is the 2012 equivalent of U2 or Led Zeppelin based on sales numbers and the breadth of fame, but the comparison is rendered a mockery under any actual music-based standard. Platinum-selling country music stars and rappers featuring X, Y, and Z are about the closest present-day analog to long-lasting power rock bands of the past. This is not to say there's not good music being produced today. I like a lot of stuff that's come out in recent years, mostly from fly-by-night, non-mainstream eclectic acts. But most of the stuff I like is by a multitude of bands that tend to disappear after one hit album, which usually contains no more than 3 righteous songs. Even looking at top 40 songs, the bands comprising that radio-ready list have little staying power. Fun has a couple of catchy tunes, but does anyone seriously think they're going to pump out one stellar album after another for years on end, like Zeppelin or the Beatles or even Nirvana did? As for the main complaint that musicians don't get paid enough from internet radio royalties, I have to agree with this quote, and I quote, "Cry me a river. Hard to get worked up over the financial travails of quasi-rock stars. Do people realize what motivates men to form bands and play on stage? They do it all for the nookie. The girls they get couldn't give a rat's ass how little they make from Pandora plays. This is why there continues to be a steady stream of aspiring young men throwing caution and their bank accounts to the wind in hopes of becoming the next indie flavor of the month." Unquote. When the day comes that dudes stop picking up guitars and warbling beta ballads to score pussy is the day that I'll entertain their griping about illegal downloading. So that concludes the article. I'm going to go ahead and read some of the comments to you guys. So Bob Smith says, "Rock in general is dying as popular music genre. Rock is basically seen as white music, but the popular musical styles of today, rap, hip-hop, and some pop, are essentially black. Bieber may be white, but the style of his songs and the overprocessed vocals is contemporary black. If Who's Next appeared today, it wouldn't be a classic because rock has lost the culture." Commenter Doclov says, "Pretty much almost anything men do is because of pussy. Usually they do things in order to get pussy. Sometimes they do things because they're not getting any pussy and need a distraction and a partial salve for the fact that they're not getting any pussy. Maybe they need a physical and mental break from getting pussy too. Men trying to get pussy may do this well or poorly, but they do it. Being a musician is a safer way of getting pussy than, let's say, joining a criminal gang, the police, or the military, as well as you have less hierarchy over you, which means you aren't someone's proverbial kitchen bitch to the same degree. Men joining musical bands, criminal gangs, the police, or the military are trying to show they have social dominance whether they realize it or not. All of them, which I listed in the previous sentence, as well as other men in other lines of work, will try to use their line of work to get better quality pussy and more pussy." So JS responds to that comment and says, "Rock lost its sex appeal. Wussy bands like REM killed it. 15-year-old boys wanted to be sex gods like Robert Plant or Mick Jagger, not sexless wusses like Michael Stipe." Commenter Martel adds, "But men are more beta now than they used to be. Guys got into AC/DC because as guys they liked AC/DC, and the women followed. There were tons of smoking hot babes at all the 80s arena shows, but even the poppier groups like Def Leppard started out as groups for primarily guys. Now, guys like what they like because it's what chicks like. The men follow the women, and our music's shit." Mr. ADHD comments, "It was all about sex and getting laid. Rock stars were alpha since the dawn. It was not until the 90s did that change. Seriously, look back at the 50s. All the music was about getting laid. Frank Sinatra sang about affairs and men with no game. He just did it with elegance. In the 60s, it was all about getting laid, and same in the 70s. Look at the Rolling Stones. Everything they sang about was trying to get women or having women. Tom Jones sang about getting women and getting laid. Led Zeppelin, women. The disco funk scene was all about getting shagged up. Then the 80s came, and it was all about getting laid and slutty women to the full extent. Men didn't give a baker's fuck so much. They wore more makeup than the women they were sleeping with, and had women dancing on nice cards and doing drugs, and all was good. Then the 90s came with the grunge movement, and all of a sudden it was cool and popular to sing about complaining. I grew up in the 90s, and I liked the music that came from it. But looking at it now, it's just a bunch of complaining pussies. And spawning that came the 2000s MySpace emo movement, where the rock star was the guy crying and complaining about the girl he loved so much he would die on a beach in California while listening to her heartbeat sink with the waves of the Pacific. It used to be about girls and getting laid. It was good. I'm going to add my own input to that last comment that I just read, which was the guy overlooked the transitional period between the grunge movement and the MySpace emo movement, that being the Korn, Linkin Park, Deftones, which kind of paved the way for that, in my opinion, because it was all about, you know, Jonathan, what's his name? Jonathan Davis from Korn. All he sang about was his shitty childhood and how much he hated his parents, which the natural progression of that would lead to that emo shit. Days of Broken Arrows chimes in with a response to Mr. ADHD, saying, "This is a really good analysis of what happened. I've seen people like Gene Simmons dance around it elsewhere, but you hit the nail on the head. What you're saying basically is white guys became politically correct and too smart to want to sing about screwing, except in an ironic sense. That left most of them as sexless betas to comment on things from the sidelines, while the highly sexual rappers took center stage. It's probably not a coincidence this happened just as the political correctness was taking over college campuses with speech codes and newspapers, and just as the sexual harassment industry was making inroads into the workplace. This blog has also spoken about how men are shamed for their sexual desires now and women aren't, the reverse of what was true in this country since the beginning. Music equals sex, even Beethoven. White guys were neutered in our society, therefore they stopped making music people felt compelled to buy. Enter Common, Jay-Z, and a host of highly sexualized women. Equals the end of the rock band. Commenter Peter Ike says, tastes are too atomized and only the most generic pop schlock gets universal play. Also, rock music, rock as an all-encompassing term here, now has multiple generations of listeners. During the 60s and 70s, it was essentially the same generation of people listening, with a slightly older but smaller 50s contingent. So the Beatles could become the voice of a generation because it was a single generation. But each generation wants its own, so things got progressively fragmented. But it took some time. Disco was the first major breakout of blackness into the white audience. In the later 70s, when punk was making headway, most of the dudes I went to high school with slagged off punk as garbage and continued to listen to Zeppelin and Tull and Pink Floyd and all that. But a few years later, everyone was into some kind of new wave or other, and the Police ruled the world. Then you had the next generation wanting its own thing, and they took up with Nirvana and grunge. Then metal splintered into 1,000 fragments. Then hip-hop comes along and fragments the white audience yet again. And on it went, each new genre entrant further splintering the tastes within generations and further separating generations from one another. At this point, it's virtually impossible for a single transcendent act to rule the scene the way the Beatles or the Stones could in their heydays. To say nothing of the new ways we have to listen to music and the decline of radio play as a factor. It's so fragmented now that there are huge monster hitmakers like Beyonce and Katy Perry, who I know about from the internet, but I can honestly say I can't identify a single one of their songs, though I'm sure I've heard them, drifting in from somewhere. And I have no interest in doing so because I know the sort of thing it is and I know I hate it. Also, let's not miss out on the fragmentation in taste is a white phenomenon. I would guess that blacks have much more alignment in their musical preferences with far less variety, i.e., whites listen to black music, blacks don't listen to white music. How many Black Mountain Goat fans are out there? God knows what Hispanics listen to.